And we're live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our virtual presentation of Shapes of Truth, Discover God Inside You with Neal Allen and Anne Lamott. This event includes an audience Q&A. To submit a question, please use the Ask a Question feature at the very bottom of the screen. And if you would like to support our store by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book, just click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer screen. All right, so with that said, let me introduce our speakers for tonight, and then we can get started. So Neal Allen is a coach and writer who studies and practices traditional and contemporary spiritual paths. His private coaching practice blends standard psychodynamics with spirituality methods. Earlier careers include newspaper journalism and corporate marketing for large public companies. And joining him in conversation is his wife and New York Times bestselling author, Anne Lamott. She is the author of Dusk, Night, Dawn, as well as 18 more books of essays, novels, and long-form nonfiction writing. So with that said, I'm going to turn my camera off. Enjoy the talk, everyone.
Hi, Vromans. Thank you so much for having us. We're so happy and honored that we got to be here. It's a truly important bookstore, and I hope you buy your books there, because if you do, and you will get much better seats in heaven. That is true. I'm a Sunday school teacher, and I know these things. So let's start. And if you have questions really about anything, about writing, spirituality, our marriage, just however you do it, chat them down, and we hope we'll get to them at the end. So I want to introduce you. I've been at Vroman a lot, but I want to introduce you to my husband, Neal, who I met 5 years ago and married under duress 2 years ago.
I keep seeing, when you say under duress, which is funny, I keep picturing somebody standing with a double-barreled shotgun, like in one of the old movies.
It was like a shotgun wedding. But when we met 5 years ago, we met on a match offshoot for old people called Our Time. And we started corresponding and writing, trying to get the other person to see how brilliant and witty we each were. And then at one point, Neal sent an email describing this book he was working on called Shapes of Truth. And it talked about the Platonic forms and these essential forms inside the body, these shapes that were principles and characteristics of divinity that were easily accessible if you would just stay with possibly uncomfortable feelings for a little while until they started to change and transform into other shapes and colors. And so I immediately panicked and thought, oh no, he's a writer, and he either wants the name of my agent, and this book just sounds like total voodoo, the color and the shapes, or else it sounded like voodoo meets romper room. So I kind of let it go. I didn't answer back because I didn't know what to say. And then he tricked me into having a cup of coffee with him. And so I met him for coffee, and I immediately liked his nose and his hands. And I sort of put aside my fear about the book, and we sat down and we started talking. And since then, we have been together every day unless one of us was out of town. We got married 2 years ago. Somebody said recently on an interview, oh, well, it sounds like you found your unicorn. And I didn't, but I found this really amazing guy who's a great match and partner for me, who has this very different spirituality than mine, which is kind of a hybrid of recovery of 35 years and a Sunday school, a tiny failing little Sunday school. So I can read the foreword, a little bit from the foreword later, where I tell you about how the Shapes of Truth actually work and how he helped me start to learn about them and be able to access them, especially when I'm really at my most clenched up and anxious or uptight. But in the meantime, this is Neal, and I thought we would just start off by you telling us what the shapes of truth are, or maybe read the paragraphs at the beginning where you describe them, or.
Oh, I can do that because unlike my brilliant wife, I am not known to be pithy. And this way, if I read from it, you won't have to like nudge me to get to the point.
I do something when I think he's talking too long, going like wrap it up, but he just completely ignores me.
Yeah.
So
hidden in your body is a set of 35 embodied concepts that describe qualities of God. You can experience them. It's as if you discover God inside you as you. These body forms inside you, when they appear, you have the feeling that part of you was hollowed out. And the body form is floating inside in 3D HD. They feel palpable, not imaginary. And they're not just special effects. Experiencing them provides a sense of well-being, respite from day-to-day concerns, and over time can help you land in a life that feels lighter, more loving, and less difficult. They might constitute most of a path to enlightenment for you. You just need to know where and how to look for them. Each body form, and by body form we'll describe them, I know this is trippy. I know this is weird. I know that this sounds kind of outlandish, but just bear with me and understand that it will continue to sound outlandish until you, on your own, not tonight, but on your own, work with a friend and actually experience them for yourselves. But I'll try to describe them conceptually as I do in the book. To those of us who experience them, they seem to be universal. A red sphere for you means the same thing as a red sphere for me. One might be, as I said, a red vibrant sphere sitting in the center of your chest, as if a phantom organ. It has a meaning. In the case of the red sphere, it means strength. We share that meaning. When either of us finds that red object, it comes with the feeling that we suddenly know our own capacity for strength. I'll interject here that it's a support for you that's particularly effective if you've gone through a period of not feeling strength, a period of feeling incapacity, as if you weren't quite as capable in the world as you would like to. That's when most likely this red sphere is going to come to you and remind you that you have a lot of support built into you that it can be tapped and is available if you know where to look. Another of these forms might be a dense ebony mountain rising in your lower abdomen. That likewise has a meaning, existence. Meeting this mountain inside, we experience a secure understanding of our own inner existence. These 35 embodied concepts, each with its own color and other sensory attributes, don't just describe reality in a peculiarly accurate way. Finding them inside you can also grant immediate and eventually sustained relief from everyday suffering.
So let me tell you specifically how it works. I only ask for help if I am just on beyond zebra in clenched mental illness and misery. That's the only time I've ever called my spiritual mentor of 35 years, whose name is Horrible Bonnie. And it's the only time I ask Neal if he can do this work with me. So that when we sit down, we get very quiet. And then he asks me, are you feeling anything specific, anything sharp or jagged or uncomfortable in your tummy or your torso or your head? And if I get quiet, I can usually find some sort of shape. Why don't I just read the little bit from the foreword? This is about our first date. So, and I had just had to fire an assistant who came in the mornings to help me with my grandchild and walk the dogs and so on. And so I showed up for our first date, just discombobulated and clenched. I mean, also it was a date. After our second cup of coffee, we got down to the books we were each writing. His was called Shapes of Truth. Oh, I asked prettily, what is it about? Let me show you, he offered, and began to walk me through the process that he describes in the book. He told me to think about my difficulty that morning with my assistant. I closed my eyes to begin the interior visualization. He asked if I felt anything distinctive in my torso, and if so, where it was. I described a cramped feeling in my lower belly, anxiety I had over the firing, and self-loathing. Neal asked me to describe the exact size of the area of tension, the shape of the area, its density, and its color. It was an ugly stain, a spilled liquid, grayish brown, the density of mercury. He asked me to stay with it for a minute. I desperately wanted to run, but I sat quietly, partly because of the cute hands and beautiful nose, but also because my stomach felt terrible, and I thought maybe this would help. Then I noticed the strangest thing, that the gray-brown liquid was floating in an empty space, as if some of my internal organs had been pushed aside and had left behind a pristine staging area. After a while, he asked if the thing in my belly was changing in any way. Well, not fast enough, I can tell you that. But in fact, it had changed slightly and continued to, becoming wider and less dense, less like mercury. Then after some time, it rose higher, eventually reaching my chest, much airier now, and then slowly rose up my throat and into the air beside me, where it disappeared. In its place, I noticed a white balloon. An icky, thick, grayish-brown blob had transformed through attention into a white balloon, hovering beside me and then magically inside me too. Ah, Neal said, you went straight to the pearl. The pearl, I asked. Yes, he said, the pearl. That white balloon is kind of like looking straight into your own soul, or at least a part of it, as if you can see both your own divinity and your ability to function in the world from your divinity. So there's these different shapes and they are cataloged at the back. So if you are working with someone and you can describe the color, the oval, the stone, the star, the whatever, you can look up what it means universally. But the work you do with your clients is about taming the inner critic exclusively. Those are the 4 words of your job description, taming the inner critic. And I wondered why you wrote this book about these sort of quirky, metaphysical, but very plain shapes that are inside all of us.
So a lot of what the inner critic does, a lot of what your belittling voice in your head that says, oh, how did you do that again? I'm such an idiot. I can't believe I did that. I'm worthless. I'm not valuable. I've got to do something in order to get people to appreciate me. I don't have enough friends, all those kind of messages. And you have your own flavor of those messages. All of us have those messages. And we all tend to think that those messages are coming from our subconscious mind, coming from deep inside us, when in fact they're coming from a little parasite that whispers to us all day long. And it's kind of a dorky, snarky, mean little bugger whose whole job is to keep you restrained and in fear and feel that you don't have value all by yourself. When I work with my clients, I have some mechanical work that helps to shift the inner critic, what the psychologists call your superego, away from your ear, away from your consciousness so much, sort of put it into semi-retirement eventually. And what's the reward? So there are 2 rewards. One is I'm not telling myself that I'm worthless anymore. I'm not telling myself that I have to achieve a lot in order to be appreciated in the world. The second is I have the capacity now and the opening to be able to go into myself and see who I might be without berating myself, who I might be without demanding that the outside world value me. I might find out that I have value inside, and I might find out that that value inside is understandable and has pieces to it. And I have a value or a standing all by myself without anybody telling me I have to do it a certain way. I have a standing of strength, and I have a standing of steadfastness and of power and of compassion. And all of those are already built into me. I don't have to fake them anymore. I don't have to argue with myself about whether I have them. There are a lot of spiritual systems that say when you get to God, it's ineffable, and let's not try to talk about that. This system, which I didn't discover, somebody else discovered, and the book describes the guy who discovered it and who taught it himself and through other people to me. This system actually says, maybe the divine isn't ineffable. Maybe the divine can be parsed out into characteristics, and maybe they function inside you. And maybe if you're born with them, you can find a kind of inner goodness that you can operate out of that is functional and strong enough that it can do what your inner critic claims to be motivating you to do, giving you the appropriate restraints to move out into the world in a productive way. Maybe you already have that inside you. Maybe you were born with it and it's not snarky and it's not mean and it doesn't tell you you're worthless.
I've seen you do this so many times with people just at dinner tables, people wondering if you would do this work with them. And the most touching one for me was when a very, very well put together woman of about 50 and her husband and daughter at the table heard about the shapes, and she wondered if you might do the work, and she was feeling a lot of sort of isolation and terrible self-esteem. And I forgot what the beginning shape was, but it was standard. It was maybe an oval or a it's like when you first see the shape, it's almost like you're looking into a snow globe. Or as we said, it's like a staging area where the organs sort of move back and there's a shape right there and you see it. And she was feeling, I think it was very angular. And by having used have her describe it, how long is it about? How wide is it? What's its texture? Is it smooth? Is it pebbled? What's it doing now? Well, it was rising slightly and rising something. And then the edges were smoothing out a little bit. And then it settled in her solar plexus in the shape of a kidney bean. And when she stayed with it a while, she started to tear up because she realized it was the fetus of herself, of who she had been before she came out to this side of eternity and started to get the message that she was not adequate and that she was annoying or that she was too needy or that she was whatever. And usually when I've seen you do the work with people, the shape arises, it comes forth from the body outside where you could just see it and kind of meet it. And she didn't want you to bring it any farther because she wanted to have that baby, her unborn baby self right there where she could always feel it and assure it that she was going to protect it and keep it safe. But so maybe you could, I know amber is a trippy shape, a color, but it's such a beautiful thing. And so many of us have had amber stones and amber rings, but maybe if you could just tell the audience about amber, for instance.
Okay. So each of these, there are 35 of documented and cataloged forms that seem to be a universal rudimentary vocabulary of nouns of value that are represented inside. They're very simple to conjure up. It doesn't matter whether you are good at sensing your body. It doesn't matter whether you are an atheist or agnostic or woo-woo or strictly rationalist. By going through a very simple process, you can discover and have this kind of parlor trick experience and use it how you wish. It's so that's first, it's simple. It requires a second person, but you don't need any training. It takes about 10 minutes to figure out how to do this. And it's just surprising that this hasn't been a game that people played with each other at the dinner table, but it just hasn't been known that this is a possibility until recently. The amber she's talking about is that one of these objects, body forms, is shows up with both the color and the shape and the feel and of amber. And in fact, when the body hollows out a little bit and the divine object appears, it often appears as a piece of amber. If the issue that you've been working on is an essential feeling of worthlessness. So when we're growing up, we learn about value as something transactional, and our meaning for value is if I produce, if I'm productive enough, and I can give you something that you would exchange something for it, then I have provided value. And if I do that enough and with enough people, I am seen as a person of value. So we think of people of substance as having some value. We might say they have a purpose in the world, or we might say that they have value because they have a lot of money, or they have a lot of fame, or a lot of power. And everybody's kind of working to kind of build up their sense of value. And everybody's a little bit worried that if I have fewer friends, I won't be perceived as having as much value, or I must not have as much value, or I would have more friends, right? And all of these are transactional views of who we are. And so they're based on my value comes from a measurement that is externally derived. My value is decided by society according to its rules of what's valuable and what's productive. So I've lived that way. Everybody's lived that way. Everybody knows, yeah, that's what value means. Well, what if suddenly you found inside a glowing, mysteriously smoky piece of amber, just like a piece of amber that you would find in a gem store, and you spend some time looking at it and just kind of turning it over and watching its smokiness, its mystery, its color, its beautiful color. It's ancient, right? It's always ancient. It's built out of an ancient process, and you're just spending time looking at it. And all of a sudden, what will happen to you is you'll notice you have something called intrinsic value, and that's what this represents.
Mm-hmm.
And intrinsic value doesn't make sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
How could I have intrinsic value? It's not transactional. Value means externally defined worth, right? Well, maybe it doesn't. Maybe there's another kind of value that you're born with. If you find this kind of value, generally speaking, what you start to notice is not only do I have value built in, I can't add or subtract from it. My intrinsic value is already full. It's already perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And you might notice, I probably have had this since I was born. Can't prove it, but it feels like it's always been with me. And maybe you'll notice, and it will always be with me until I die, and it won't change. Well, that's gonna kind of change my perception of what's the importance of the external value that I'm seeking to be seen as having if I already have all this value inside. When it gets really cool is that when I've spent a fair amount of time, maybe 5 or 6 times looking at this, only 5 or 10 minutes each time, but 5 or 10 times looking at this piece of amber that suddenly shows up inside me, I might notice everybody's got intrinsic value. And it's another path to a form of empathy that has to do with, I am more interested in in the ways you are like me, that you have value already in you, that you, like me, have strength already in you, that you, like me, have power and compassion and love and passion already in you in a perfect way. And that all these filters of trying to showboat and trying to make myself shiny and trying to make myself be seen by others as having surface value, all of that may be secondary, and all of those identities may be not as important to me anymore as the fact that I am just like you and I have perfect value already, and it's kind of ordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Everybody has wanted to know, since we've been out flogging your book, what it's like to have two writers
Yeah.
with books out at the same time under the same roof. And it's funny because I don't really think about it. It just seems like on the compound, Sam is over in this office doing his thing and his creation, and Jax is in there painting tiny, tiny, tiny figurines. And your daughter, Marina, whose album is out today called Candle Power, Marina Allen, she was in the back room creating this album. And then I'd written a book about it that I finished a year ago. And then you had this book under contract twice and then bought it back from both publishers because it was just not a good match. Ultimately, it was just too frustrating. And it just felt like real life, although it must seem like a beehive or a little Keebler-El factory of creation to people hearing about it. But my experience is it's just so workaday. You know, when we see Sam walk by in his bathrobe to make sure Jax has gotten his lunch together for school, and Jax can't find his bike helmet, and Marina's got a new melody in her head. And
in the middle of it, you might hand me an essay or a piece that you've written for Facebook and say, can you look this over?
Right.
Or I might hand you a chapter and say, can you look this over?
Right.
And it just kind of fits into the middle of the day.
Yeah. And then, so neither of us would publish. There's an excerpt, by the way, if you're interested, on the compassion, the work around compassion at spiritualityandhealth.com. But I would never publish anything without you going over it first. And I mean, Neal sits down. He calls himself a hack writer because he's worked for newspapers and magazines and for a company. And it just comes out good, you know, except for he's overeducated. So it comes out too erudite. And so I just go through and I cut out anything with a word I'd have to look up, or anything too conceptual and woo-woo. And but he can write it. It comes out of him pretty fully formed, like, is it Athena out of the head of Zeus? Whoever springs fully formed. And for me, it's terrible first drafts, ever so slightly second draft. And after the second draft, I might hand it to you. And then you do the hardest work. For anyone who has to give me any criticism, like Sam, who's right here, could tell you, I'm so in the wrong profession. I cannot stand criticism. I tear up. And you always say, I'm going to love this. And there's so much beautiful stuff here. I'm just wondering, you might say, whether these first two paragraphs are sort of throat clearing. And maybe the piece really starts closer to the bottom of page 1, and you'll mark it up. And at first I'll just think really bitter thoughts about you and what an ass hat you are and how critical. And then I am flooded with gratitude that somebody who loves me and loves my work will tell me the truth so that I can make it as good as it can possibly be. And I'll do 95% of what you suggest. And then I don't show it to you again, so you don't see that I ignored the other 5%.
I mean, it's you know, having ideas, having thoughts, having our own writing rejected is no different. It's in our 60s than it was in our teens. It's hard. And what happens when she's marking up a piece of mine is she'll walk through and say, well, you might want to change this. And I'll say, no, I'm good with that. And you might want to change this. And I'll say, no. I already thought that through. I'm pretty sure of that. Yeah. And I'll just reject all of her changes. And then I'll take the marked up copy back and I'll look at it. I'll usually wait an hour, and then I'll go into it and I'll end up going, oh yeah, she's right. I make all the changes. Yeah. I actually am not sure. Maybe I think I accept 98% of your changes. Yeah. It's funny. And then because we're just like, I mean, it's weird. I should know better. I should know that, just accept them all and I'm better off. Right. Yeah. But I'm going to defend myself for a while first. Yeah. It's funny.
It works. And then people have also wanted to know what it's like for two people with such completely different spiritual paths living under one roof. And it's funny because that's another thing I don't think about. But I really am just so recovery based, 12-step recovery, and church in this tiny little ghetto in Marin County called Marin City. And I don't think interesting theological thoughts. I don't pursue, but yet I would say that what we share is that we're both passionately interested in spiritual truth and in spiritual and psychological healing and in disseminating what we come upon that we think might be helpful to people who are in their own struggles. But I actually don't know what the hell you are, what the name of what you are is, if there's a name. It's very ecumenical. It's very sort of neo-Buddhist, very woo-woo, sort of Hindu, Ram Dassi. I know you love my church. I know whenever you've been there, you've been moved to tears by this small, sweet congregation and the singing. But can you try to put into words what it is you actually believe?
Oh God, that's so hard because it changes all the time, right?
Mhm.
So I believe primarily that a major job that I have is to disrupt my beliefs.
Mhm.
So one of the side messages of the dark night of the soul, of the kind of core Christian mysticism, is that you have to be a belief loser to aspire to a greater freedom in life. And I think freedom and God are kind of commingled. And I take it very literally and seriously when Jesus comes right out of the gate, and what's the first thing he says? He's basically been looking around and he's ready to talk and tell people what he's seen. And he says, first thing he says is blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God. Well, the poor in spirit are the people who have disrupted all of the belief systems around them. They've disrupted them through failure, through the dark night of the soul, and they've sunk down, and they have nothing left. And then something cool shows up, right?
Mhm.
And that's the 12-step version of spirituality, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it works, and it's true, and it's also at the core of Zen Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism and Vedantism. All of them require me to look around and say, this is crazy that I am always stuck in this materialist, empiricist, formal world that tells me that I have to be productive all the time, and tells me that wealth matters,
Mhm.
and fame matters, and being close to the concerns of my species from the standpoint of making sure the species fills every niche possible, that's my job. And that's
Uh-huh.
crazy because
Uh-huh.
I also have a me. And that
Mhm.
me, that individual, is generous and lovely when removed
Mhm.
from the need to be productive
Yeah.
and have use value.
Yeah.
And we meet there, and we meet places like that. I
Mhm.
think of it very much like how we're very different writers, but
Mhm.
that we're writers, right? So
Mhm.
you're a brilliantly melodic writer. You're clever. You have rhythm and harmony too. But your work shines, and it's funny, and it's rich, and it brings people very quickly into a beautiful place. And that's like melody to me. I'm not like that. I'm not a melodist.
Mhm.
It's like if we were Beatles, you would be Paul,
Mhm.
writing these leaping, beautiful melodies, and I'd be John. I can
Uh-huh.
do a kind of rhythmic thing, and I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty good at harmony,
Uh-huh.
right? And I can do a melody if I need to, but it's not my strength, right?
Uh-huh.
And John and Paul, when they were getting along, they could talk together about music in a
Mhm.
way that nobody else could talk together. And
Mhm.
I feel lucky that I get to talk about spiritual things with you. And
Mhm.
we riff on it every once
Mhm.
in a while when we're
Mhm.
writing about spiritual matters. Whoever's writing at that time about a spiritual matter will not infrequently go to the other and say, hey, I'm working on this sense of soul. Do you know about that sense of soul? Oh, yeah, I think I do. Well, how does it show up for you?
Right.
And we both trust that um, we're we're in the right business, looking at the big stuff, looking at what is God, looking at what is death, looking at what is me and other, looking at what is love. And ultimately, I trust that Annie is more interested in getting at the truth of things than proving herself right. And so she's really interesting to talk to.
Oh, thanks. You said two things before we move on to questions with Rira, if there are some. Two things this year that within the last year that really helped me and changed me. One was when I was talking about a very painful memory of having been betrayed by people and maybe having betrayed them at the same time, and how I had just tried to keep it, wrapped up and shoved into the back shelf in the garage. And you said those miserable memories and experiences are the keys to the kingdom. Let's talk about it. Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And I started to describe it to you, and it was like one of the shapes of truth, just morphing into a different shape and it was like that idea of retrieving your soul from these really bad memories that have gotten impacted in us, that have gotten stuck and solidified inside of us.
Yeah.
And I found that I did retrieve my memory my soul from that memory. And I did realize that almost everything was a key to that was miserable was a key to the kingdom. And the other thing you said that was so funny was you sort of taught me the power of saying, I don't know. What's this mean? I don't know. What do you think's going to happen? I don't know. Are they going to stay together? I don't know. What do you think we should do about that? What are we going to do with that person? You know what? I don't know, because I like to know, and you're a know-it-all. And there's that great acronym for fear of the frantic effort to appear recovered. And I'm always so afraid of looking like I'm a loser, or that I don't have a clue really, or I'm a total fraud. And so as soon as I'm breaking through that fear by just telling you more or saying, I don't know, and we start to talk, it very gently changes shape and texture and density. And then it gets sort of airy and sort of funny again. And every single person I've ever seen you do the shapes of truth work with at the end has started to smile or laugh and to go, oh, for God's sake, I had no idea that was going on inside of me. And it's not, and I know that they have never forgotten the experience of just finding and working with one shape, sitting with it for 20 minutes or 10 minutes or half an hour, and watching it become what it has to impart to you about how it has always been there.
Yeah.
Rira, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I was just looking through questions. So we have a short question from Jen. You mentioned that there was an excerpt of your book available. Where can they find it on a website?
Yeah, it's spirituality & health is the site. It's a magazine and a website, and I'll also be on a podcast in about a week from it. But I think it's spirituality and spelled out, all spelled out, spiritualityandhealth.com. It's something like that. And put in my name, Neal Allen, and spirituality and health, and you'll find it. It's a chapter from the book about compassion. And the point of the chapter, I might as well
yeah, go ahead.
The chapter is most of us conflate compassion with pity or sympathy. And I tend to believe that actual compassion is simply fascination with somebody else's suffering. And by fascination, I don't mean gloating. I mean interest. And this is actually the Parsifal tale of the Fisher King, which is you're going to get a lot more out of asking somebody to tell you about their suffering than to say, oh, I know that one, I've got a good idea for it, or, oh, you poor thing, right? It's more, tell me more, tell me more, tell me more, because we vent and we complain in order to reify. We want to make clear that we're talking about something we know, the suffering that we're talking about. So we reify it by complaining about it, or by going back to that traumatic event and revisiting it. And we make it real and real and real over and over again. And then poof, one day it looks less real. It looks more cardboard. It looks more two-dimensional. And then another day, depending on how deep the suffering is, this can be many, many visits. But if it's just you had a bad day with your boss, it can be 10 minutes of, instead of, oh, you poor thing, having a bad day with your boss, you might do what Annie does and say, have a cup of tea. But the point of the cup of tea is to offer you the chance to say, this is what happened. This is what happened. This is what happened. And usually venting and complaining enough about a piece of suffering, if you're given the chance to, it'll go away, or something will replace it. Or you'll get embarrassed and think, God, it's not so bad as I thought.
Right.
This question is from Marianne. Is it possible to do this work outside your body? I can do it while looking at a mirror, but I can't seem to visualize anything inside of my body when doing the Shapes of Truth work.
That's interesting, but I think you have to do it with another person. And the reason you have to do it with another person, at least for a long time, and the reason that people don't know about this is that your inner critic, your superego, has a lot of power to guard you from doing this work, because it knows that if you move away from your mind, your head center, and move into the body, that it's got no power over you in there, and that the body is more of a truth teller and has some built-in resistance to the kind of storytelling and falsifications, or just narrow views of your superego. I wish you could do it yourself. I wish you could do it in a mirror. But I think you'll find that if you do it with a friend, it's easier than you thought. If not, write me and let me know, and I'll try to work with you about it. Yeah.
You can write to him at shapesoftruth.com. But the other aspect of doing it with a friend is that it's just so amazing, but also hard to let somebody help you and hold some space for you at that level. We're so good at being the helpers and helping everybody else take some rest and settle down and have a cup of tea. But for us to receive it, it's a great line of the poet Blake saying that we're here to learn to endure the beams of love. And I am so glad to help, but for me to take Neal away from his work or his reading or whatever and say, can we do the work right now? I'm so uptight. It's such progress. It's such progress to receive that love. It's one of the ways that we give love, is to let somebody bestow it upon us. Yeah.
This question is from Abby. What do you mean by retrieving the memory? What do you mean that retrieving the memory was the keys to the kingdom? Can you explain that more?
Retrieving the soul from bad memories. Like, I have some memories of stuff I've done sober, so in the last 35 years, that where things just got away from me, and I behaved really badly, or I was scared and I did the best I could and it sucked, or somebody made me feel terrible and I went into my defensiveness, although I mostly just get very quiet, and then I weaponize that quiet, and it's very scary, trust me. And in those memories, I still react when they float into my head, or if I see a title of a book, or if I see a word, or a pair of saltwater sandals that the person was wearing when this happened on the beach. It feels like it's just as real and badly vital as it ever was. I feel kind of sick with shame, I guess you'd call it, and so how do I retrieve that memory? Well, I don't think it into the ground, how do I retrieve my soul? Well, I join it in the memory, and then I lure it back to me. I say to the person or the people who I have wronged, or who really shamed or hurt me, I say, thank you. It's like keys to the kingdom. It's like, thank you so much, because I can tell that this is not just an important nerve, that you've hit a nerve, but that something in my soul is so damaged and needs my attention. So you won't be able to help me with that. So I'm just going to release you and thank you, and you take care. And then my soul, I usually lure my soul over with a bowl of Cheetos in the new issue of People magazine. Who could resist? And I say, just come back here. They're done. We're surrendering into the care of higher power and a friend. And then I can feel it. I know it sounds ridiculous or hallmarky or whatever, but if you do it just with one bad memory tonight, if you go to that memory and you thank the people who caused you to feel so badly about yourself, and you thank them for evoking that in you and releasing them to go on with their lives, you probably don't need to see them again. And then you bring your soul back to where you are and where you're integrating and where you're waking up and becoming whole again. So that's what I meant.
And don't expect to be able to do it at first with a particularly harrowing memory. But do notice ultimately by looking at a number of memories that they're curated. And who do you think is curating your memories?
Mm-hmm.
Same inner critic that's belittling you all the time. Your memories are primarily curated to keep you feeling small.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way around it that I know is to go back into the memories. And you might notice this one thing, which is you've got a memory that on that day, that person did that thing to you, right? But didn't you do other things that day before and after that? Particularly if it's a memory when you were 7 years old, didn't a lot of things happen that day? Why is that the memory that keeps being retrieved and thrown in your face through your whole life?
Mm-hmm.
And you start to wonder like I said, who's curating this show?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also for me, I actually did do it with a harrowing memory about 6 months ago. And it was a memory when my child was 4 or 5, and I've had it for 26 years, and made amends and did the work that I was instructed to do. And still, if I thought about him, if I saw the saltwater sandals, if I could have that shame, that flicker, of, and let's move on. But I didn't, because of various coaches, including Neal and horrible Bonnie and whatnot. And I went into it, and I realized that it was the portal to something great that obviously I wasn't getting to any other way. And if the willingness comes from the pain. And if I've made myself just mental enough and miserable enough, maybe I'm going to have the willingness to take a look at it. And I did. I just went right into it. And I kind of sighed the way you sigh when you're with people and you just realize this is sort of hopeless. And I felt us all sigh, and then I thanked them, and I said, I've apologized. I've made amends for my part in this, but I just want to thank you, because I wouldn't have taken a look at this without you. And I want to, because I think it is really important gateway for me to walk through in terms of healing that terrible damage from childhood and crazy parents and self-loathing and shame and defensiveness. And I felt it within a few minutes. I felt, because otherwise my soul sort of spikes out like a sea anemone, that it wants to go there, it's going there, it's got to make sure that it's like having plates in the air, my poor soul. And so to kind of gather them all around, and then pull the purse strings tight around, so it's back in me, which of course in the torso or the solar plexus is the staging area we're talking about, where we might see a shape that can lead us, and that you can look up in the back of the book. What was that all about? Well, look it up.
Okay, so it looks like we are out of time, but thank you so much, Anne and Neal. That was such a wonderful conversation, and thank you for your words of wisdom and comfort. To everyone who tuned in, thank you so much. Again, if you would like to purchase a copy of Shapes of Truth, just click on the green purchase button directly below the viewer screen. It'll take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. And to those who tuned in late, don't worry, a replay of this talk will be available after the broadcast ends.
And a shout out to Renata and Colin and Adelaide, my granddaughter, who I will get to visit and see all three of you next week.
And thank you, Vroman, so much. This is such an honor to be here. I'll see
It's
you
an
in
honor to
person
have you.
here. Yeah.
Yes, we'll see you in person soon, hopefully. All
Yeah.
right. Have a good night, everyone. All right,
Bye-bye. Thank
bye.
you.